Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Stairway to Redemption. This week, I'm joined by author and spiritual coach Jessica Morris. Jessica is also in recovery, and today we're gonna talk about religion, higher power, and a lot of Jesus. How she became sober through religion and to spirituality. um, and she's also going to share with us her very peculiar story that I cannot wait for you to hear. And yeah, Jessica, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. It's so great to be here with you. This is my
Mhm.
favorite thing in the world to talk about,
Okay.
especially with people who get it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you heard, the format. The first question is the state of the mind address. So tell us what's going on with you lately. Something deeper than I'm just doing fine.
Well, you know what? I'm sort of flying by the seat of my pants lately, but also with a lot of trust and faith.
Hmm.
In when was it? The end of October. Last year, I left my job of 30 plus years in higher education fundraising and event planning, that sort of thing. That's what I was doing for my whole career, really. And it wasn't ever anything I really wanted to do, but it paid the bills and there was health insurance attached to it. So it was always a really
Hmm.
good thing. And I met some wonderful people along the way. However, I knew there was more. I knew there was something more. And so I have been writing for a long time. And my second book came out in September. I've published through independent publishers because trying to find some big publishing house to take hold of me was just like beating my head against the wall.
Hmm.
So I found an independent publisher who was excited about especially my most recent book, and that was released in September. And my husband is about 3 years away from retirement, and we were talking, and he and I agreed, and it really was his decision. He said, I want you to have health insurance by the time I retire, but for now, I think you need to do the writing full time to make a go of it. And he was absolutely right. There's so much involved in trying to start a writing ministry. And so I've been doing that since November 1st of last
Okay.
year. And I just finished my third book that I just sent off to the publisher. So I'm excited to hear what he thinks. It's the same publisher who did the second one for me, Higher Powered, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But and if he doesn't, if he's not interested in it because it's not his cup of tea, then I'll find somebody else. I mean, because that's kind
Yeah.
of what God's been doing for me. He just keeps showing me the way, and it's so I'm excited, and I don't ever really get nervous anymore. That's something that recovery and my relationship with God has pretty much relieved me of. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm kind of like, okay, here I am. I'm 55. I'm not retired yet because I really am working hard at the writing and marketing myself, which, by the way, I really do not like. I used to I used to love putting myself out there, when
Yeah.
I was in my disease, I was all over the place, about how
Hmm.
great I was. And now when I talk about it, it's kind of like, should I even be talking about this?
Yeah.
And they're like, you got to get followers on social media
Instagram.
and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that stuff. But
Yeah.
it's part of the process. So I'm doing the best I can. I do drag my heels in some places, but yeah, I mean, so yeah, that's the state of the mind right now is just trust, and we'll see what God offers up next. I'm kind of excited about it.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you said mentioned that the thing with try getting off from the social media part and also not being nervous anymore, that not being stressed about things because how at peace you are. And I've like similar experience. I lost my a job like last month, and I was doing security work for like for a retail company, and I was boxing on the side. I was coaching boxing. I like to box.
Hmm.
So when I lost the job, I tried to I made like a page just for boxing because I noticed that my personal page was starting getting too much boxing in it.
Hmm.
And also I was kind of reticent at the idea of having a public page, but now I made one just for boxing. It's just boxing in there, so I can like not overcrowd my main page and people can actually see what I offer. And I'm the same way. Like I'm like I don't feel about putting myself out there like I used to.
Yeah.
Like so what I did so far, I just limit myself 2-3 posts a week,
Hmm.
and let's see, because there's a vicious cycle that once you like get that external validation, you get addicted to it. I saw myself like, okay, so I created the page a month ago. I already got like 10,000 views. I'm like, oh wow, that's impressive. Like, yeah, like now I'm like looking at the numbers. I'm like, and yeah, it can be a vicious cycle. So I try to be mindful and aware that like this is not what I'm looking for. This is just a byproduct of me myself putting myself out there. But
Right.
it's funny that we share that.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's start with the beginning. Tell us your story. How did you end up in recovery?
Well, I probably
Mhm.
from the day I was born, I should have been taken right away to an Al-Anon meeting. You know, I was born into a family. My father was an alcoholic, and
Mhm.
both my granddads. Now, of course, my dad was the only one who ever admitted to it, but there were a lot of alcoholics sprinkled, in my family tree. So we'll just talk about him. But my mom grew up in the family disease of alcoholism. So she, was very good at being the wife of an alcoholic. And
Mhm.
I'm the youngest of four, and my dad was also a minister. So
Mhm.
it was hard because of two things. One, he was really good at his job. He was a very good minister, great speaker, really good with people. The people in our town, we lived in a very small town, and the people in our town loved him. He went out drinking and smoking with them, I mean, and I think that was something that endeared him to them, because they felt better about themselves. The minister's out with us drinking, so it's okay, and so that was really hard because he came home and he was pretty violent. He was either violently rageful or absent emotionally,
Mhm.
so there was no real in between at home. He was also really inappropriate with my mother in front of us, and that might not sound like a big deal, but for a little girl, that's not a good way to see your mom. And my mom allowed him to treat her that way. So I mean, I don't want to just blame him,
Mhm.
because she was a grown up as well, and in hindsight, of course, I can see that. And so early on in my life, I don't remember my exact age, but my dad was probably drinking, and he revealed to me that I was a mistake, that my parents only wanted three
Oh wow.
children, and that's the word he used, mistake. And I went to my mother and asked her if that was true, and all she said was, he shouldn't have told you that. Like, she didn't say, oh,
Wow.
no, no, that's not true. She just said, oh, he shouldn't have
Yeah.
told you that. And so I grew up, and I kept that a secret because I thought, if my siblings know that I'm a mistake, they're going to beat the crap out of me, because we already beat the crap. I mean, we were siblings, right? So we
Yeah.
already beat each other up, and,
Mhm.
playfully. But, I was afraid if anyone knew that I was a mistake, then I would be discarded in
Mhm.
whatever way. And so my earliest memories are of food, I mean, I went right to the food first. I don't have any memories from childhood where food isn't part of it. I just was eating brought me comfort. And early on, I also had the comfort of alcohol because my mom made a cough syrup that had either whiskey or it was whiskey or gin or something was in it, some kind of alcohol. And I can remember faking having a cough so that I could get some of that because I remember it going, that first drink you have that you can feel it go all the way down to your toes, that was the memory that I have, and I can never get back to that feeling ever again after that. And so I spent a lot of time sneaking both food and alcohol as I was growing up. Of
Mhm.
course, hating my father for being an alcoholic, but doing the same thing without even knowing I was doing the same. I was already going down that road when I was a child. And when I got into high school, I was really worried about grades and stuff until I got into high school and I started recognizing boys and, I wanted to go to the parties and so I secretly became the party girl, until I went to college and then all bets were off because nobody was watching. And, I don't know how I got through, to be honest with you, it's a miracle that I got through college in 4 years. I don't know how I did that. But my weight, oh gosh, my first diet was probably like, I don't know, I was probably like 11 or 12 years old. And my mom put me on a diet because I was gaining weight rapidly. And so my entire life from that first diet until I got into recovery was just this roller coaster of weight up and down. I'd gain and lose the same 50 pounds. I can't even tell you how many times. By the end, I was about I my top weight, I've lost about 120 pounds and kept that off in my recovery. But that 120 pounds came on and off probably twice. This is really bad for your body. This is not
Yeah.
good for your health. And I was 29 when I got into recovery. So this was a lot of fierce weight changes in the whole time drinking alcohol to excess, using laxatives. I never was able to make myself throw up. So I would use exercise as a bulimic type behavior. So I would eat a whole pizza, and then I go running or I do aerobics for 4 hours or whatever so that I could get rid of all of that. And for a while, when you're young, that sort of works because your metabolism is kind of, it's really working for you. And it stopped working though. And I also stopped having any control over it. Like I was unable to control my food intake and my alcohol intake anymore. I mean, there were times when I could diet and lose weight, but towards the end, I would say about the last 4 or 5 years, I might have tried a couple times to lose weight, but it just kept coming on and I was packing it on and packing it on. And meanwhile, my behaviors are horrendous. I mean, anybody who's an addict knows, or anybody who's got a family member who's an addict knows, you don't want to be around that person anymore. Like, because you just become like, I became so self absorbed and not that, I mean, I always was self absorbed because I was a very depressive child. And there was a lot of trauma in my childhood. And so, I was suicidal all that time, constantly trying to figure out how I could kill myself without anyone knowing I killed myself, like that it would look like an accident. Because I wouldn't want my family to have a stain on them, because of the mistake that they made, and I mean, like, that's how my brain thought. And so drinking and eating helped me to escape that noise. And two things happened it was about 6 years before I found recovery. It was the year after I graduated from college, and I went back to college to party with my friends every weekend because that's what really professional smart women do. They go back to
Yeah.
college to party. And so I was at a party and it was January. I remember that it was January. It was freezing cold, Pennsylvania, freezing cold. And I went outside to smoke a cigarette. I was all by myself. And I remember looking up at the stars in the sky, and it was just this beautiful, clear night. And it was, I feel like I don't even know a large number beyond gazillion, but it was like a gazillion stars in the sky. So beautiful. And all I could do was hate God in the moment. Like I couldn't appreciate that. I couldn't, and I just started yelling at God. And now I have not, I left the church when I was 18 because I saw what the church, I shouldn't say the church allowed my father to get away with.
Yeah.
And so I left the church. I never became an atheist or anything. I always believed, still believed in God, but I pretty much thought God hated me. I thought I was a mistake. I mean, my dad told me that, and he was my minister, so of course God must think that also. And so I was yelling at God, and I always had a really pretty special relationship with Jesus, mainly because he it sounds so funny when I say this because this is not true, but because his dad abused him too. Like that's how
Yeah.
my brain used to think. Jesus understands me
That's funny.
because his dad beat the crap out of him too. Like
Uh-huh.
that. So but it kept me connected. So that's important. It kept me connected. And so I'm standing there yelling at God, thinking, wondering why I'm not getting struck by lightning because I'm thinking, he's hating on me right now. And I had this sense of warmth in this freezing cold night, warmth and peace just flow over me. And I knew that if I turned and looked to my left, Jesus was standing right next to me, just standing, physically standing there, not a ghost, not just, it was Jesus. He was standing there. I could turn and hug him. And for a second, I was happy, I guess, but it immediately turned to fear because I knew everything I'd done, he'd seen it. And at that point, I had done a lot of really horrible things. And so I ran back into the party. And I look back on that, and for a long time, boy, did I regret that. I mean, it was one of the biggest regrets I ever had that I really blocked it from my mind for a very long time that it even happened. And it was about 6 years later, I moved to a new town, which is actually where I live now, and I was seeing a counselor, and because I needed to fix everybody around me, so I went to see a counselor. and, and after about a year, she said to me, you have a lot of childhood trauma that you need to work on. She said, but these addictions of yours, especially this food thing, until you get those things under control in some way, the trauma work that we do in here is not going to take hold
Oh,
because
okay.
the food is in the way. The food is until you put that down and let it go. We're not going to be able to make any headway on this trauma work. And she sent me to a recovery program for compulsive eaters. And off I went because for whatever reason, God opened my mind. Up until that point, had anybody said anything like that to me, I was no. And because I know my mom tried to get me into, a recovery because my dad at this point now was going to AA. So, you know, but because my dad was doing it and he was still kind of a jerk, you know, I didn't want any part of that because it obviously didn't work. That's how
Yeah.
my brain thought. And I also didn't want to surrender. There's that word surrender, right? So I went to my first meeting and I was just speechless. I mean, I could not believe that these people were talking about food the way I acted with food. Because for the most part, I thought I was the only person that ever did these things. I had seen TV movies about anorexics or bulimics, But I couldn't actually do I tried, I prayed to be an anorexic, but I love food. I'm not going to stop eating. Like I couldn't that lasted maybe 2 days, and I couldn't do that. And then I thought, well, I'll do the bulimia thing where I can make myself throw up
Mhm.
and then I can eat as much as I want. And I couldn't make myself throw up. I tried every way I knew how and I couldn't do it. And but here's a room full of people and they seemed relatively happy. Like they were happy, they were in regular sized bodies, they seemed healthy, and they were laughing about things that they had done with food. And it was blowing my mind and I couldn't wait to get out of there. I mean, I because I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. And one of the things I heard them say that first night is no sugar in your food at all because sugar is the addictive substance. 3 meals a day, nothing in between. That's what I heard them say, right? Which is, that's a normal eating plan, right?
Yeah.
No, not
Yeah.
for me because I ate all day long, right? And sugar was at the top of the list. And so I
Mhm.
wanted out of there, even though I knew I needed to be there. I wanted out. And this woman, God bless her, she like tripped over people getting to me. She was, I didn't know this, but she would soon be my grand sponsor because
Mhm.
her one of her sponsees ended up being my sponsor. But she looked me dead in the face and she said, Jessica, please come back. Please come back. And I was like, I have to go back now because this lady is being so nice and she wants me to come back, and it was like, but I still had to get out, and I left. And that whole week I go to more than one meeting a week now, but I thought it was like, any weight loss program I had ever been to before. You just go once a week. But that whole week I did that, no sugar, and I
Mhm.
just ate 3 meals a day. Of course, my plates were heaping full for those 3 meals, but it was 3 meals a day. I didn't eat anything in between. And I thought, well, that next week I was getting ready to go to the meeting. I was sitting on the couch in my apartment and I thought, this was pretty easy. I don't really need to go back. I know what I need to do. And I don't hear God like audibly, like a voice in my ear. I get sort of this, it's almost like wind flows through me or something. And I have a thought and I know it's from God. And the first one that I ever knew happened was that night. And it was, Jessica, if you don't go to that meeting, you are going to die. And it was that clear and I shot up out of that I was off to the meeting. I was because I didn't want to die. I mean, it was the first time in my life I really felt like I don't want to die. I don't want to be gone from here. There's still things I need to do. And
Mhm.
I believe that was obviously that's God. That's the Holy Spirit dwelling within me, but I just didn't know it yet. I believe that Jesus came to me at that party to let me know he was there. He knew I was going to run away because Jesus knows everything, but he
Mhm.
wanted me to know, look, I'm right here, you know? And then when he saw that I couldn't look right at him, he offered me these people in recovery who looked dead in my eyes and said, please come back. And I could look right at them and I could, because they were me, whether that woman was a Christ follower or not, doesn't matter. It's that she gave a crap about who I was because she could see herself in me. And so that's really I hope that what did you say? How did I get to recovery?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will just say one other thing real quick.
Mhm.
It took me about another year after that to admit I was an alcoholic. Now I wasn't drinking because there's no drinking in the program for the food. But I was what they call stark raving sober. Have you ever heard that? Somebody
No.
who's sober but still insane, like just crazy
Oh,
off
yeah,
their
yeah,
nut.
like,
Yeah. I mean, and my sponsor in that food program sent me to an addictions counselor because she knew
mhm.
because she was in the program for alcoholics. So she knew what she saw in me because it was her. And she's like,
Yeah.
"Here, go see this guy," And So after I was with him for a little while, I was like, fine, I'll go to an AA meeting if that's what you want me to do, and it pissed me off because I didn't want to have what my dad had, but it was absolutely where I needed to be. And then I eventually added for family and friends, and I go to that also. I'm a 3-time winner. So, I mean, so that's my journey into recovery. A lot has happened since then,
Mhm.
of course, but that's how I got there.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing the your story. I haven't heard that term that you used to. The term that I heard was dry drunk. But what did you say
I
again? Can
said
you say that again?
stark raving sober.
Star,
Stark raving sober. Kind of like
stark
you're
raving sober.
you're like I'm trying to kind of like you have your hair on, people who have their hair on fire for Jesus, but all they do is wave the Bible at you.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that. So I was waving the big book at people, but I
yeah.
was
Big book term for yeah.
yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
But I
Oh
wasn't
man, yeah.
actually following the directions. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those guys, those people are a little bit tricky,
Yeah, yeah.
but you can sense. So yeah, when did you um we found religion again? Because you just talk about how you ended up in recovery, and even the experience with Jesus, you said like it was in hindsight that, like, like you remember, so that memory was blocked. So what was at what point during your journey uh did you reconcile with God?
It happened over time. It was a
Hmm.
gradual thing early on in recovery. Thank God that the recovery programs, are real clear that it's higher power. It doesn't have to be any one thing, any one particular religion. In fact, the word religion is pretty much drummed out anytime anybody says it, which is a good
Hmm.
thing because I think so many people do come in with a lot of bad ideas about what religion is. And, religion is what human beings have done to the message of spirituality, really.
Oh,
Like I look at the message of Jesus Christ, and then I look at the how many denominations of Christ followers are there, and it makes me shake my head and go, seriously, do you all
yeah,
think you're doing it the right way? I mean, he gave us, one thing. He said, love each other as I've loved you. Why do you need to have doctrines about that? Like that's kind
yeah.
of where I go in my head. So that's a whole nother podcast. But anyway, uh, so what happened for me in early recovery is I used the acronym God, good,
Hmm.
orderly direction. So my first higher power was good, orderly direction because at that time, I really still believed that God hated me, like the God of my childhood. And so my sponsor suggested, how about anytime somebody says the word God in a meeting, you just replace it in your mind with good, orderly direction. So it's something that's higher than you, it's outside of you, it's not you making a decision, it's you going to a meeting and asking for help or calling
Hmm.
somebody or reading your literature or whatever or giving service, so it's good orderly directions. For a long time that worked, but then it didn't, and I started seeking answers, like I'd go on Amazon and I'd put in books on spirituality or books about Jesus or whatever, because I've always loved Jesus so much. And um I just was reading everything I could get my hands on, one of my favorite books during that time, it's called Messy Spirituality. And the author's name is, oh gosh, Michael. Oh, I can't remember. It's a great book though because it's all about, you know sinners, sinners who love Jesus, and that's the whole point, isn't it? Right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's who he came to save. And but for a long time, I thought I had to be perfect. And so over time, where I was working, well, I did a lot of that trauma work and that helped. That counselor that my sponsor sent me to, He was just a beautiful man of faith, and he was also in recovery, so he understood, and he really helped me to truly excavate the crap of my childhood from within my soul and just let it go, stop the resentments and the expectations and all that stuff that kept me chained to it.
Mhm.
My dad could come to me and apologize for all the things he did to me or all the things he said to me, but he's never going to be able to give me back my innocence, right? So
Mhm.
why am I holding him up on charges? He's a sick man. He was a sick man while he was still alive. And so for me to continue not forgiving him was only hurting me. And that's, as I was going through that trauma work, that's the thing that really sunk into me. And then I met the new chaplain was hired where I worked, and I was doing an event, and I invited him to give the prayer before the meal at the event, and he didn't know anyone else, so I had him sit by me, during the event, and we got to talking, and I was of course suspicious of him because he had the collar on, he was a minister, and
Yeah.
I was like always suspicious of ministers, but I really liked him, and he seemed really down to earth, and we kept running into each other on campus or whatever. And then one day I heard me saying to him, "Do you ever talk to staff members about God or just to students?" And he said, "Sure, I took that's my job is to be here for everybody who needs to talk about God. That's what I'm here for." And I started to go talk to him, and he was the first man of the cloth, they call it, that I trusted in my whole life. And he encouraged me to follow, my instinct in regards to, I started saying things like, I want to go to seminary to learn. Like, I didn't even want to be, because I'm still not involved in organized religion at this point. I'm like, I don't want to be a minister. I just want to learn about these things for myself, like not have my dad tell me or have some minister tell me, just I want to go and learn it. Now, try telling that to your husband that there's no job on the other end of this, but it's going to cost us a lot of
Yeah.
money for me to do that, But you can only say no to God for so long,
Mhm.
and he just kept poking at me and poking at me and poking at me. Meanwhile, I wrote my first book, which was a daily meditation book, for people in recovery or not, but mostly for recovery people, just looking for God, searching for God. And
Mhm.
that led me to finally taking the plunge, my husband saying, okay, and I started seminary part time
Mhm.
in 2014. And it took me 6 years to get through it. And while I was there, wow, the transformation, it's almost, I, it's hard to even describe, I
Mhm.
mean, I just fell in love with Jesus like nobody's business. And I tripped over while I was there. I took a 1 credit class called Individual Spiritual Direction because I needed a 1 credit class that semester, and somebody said, "Here, take this. You'll like it. There's no exam. You just have to write a paper," And I ended up staying an extra year to get a certificate in spiritual direction because I just absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Mhm.
And so that's when I was in seminary is when I really started saying my higher power is the Trinity, God, Jesus, Holy
Yeah.
Spirit.
Mhm.
I started putting a name on it and trusting it, and just my morning quiet times became longer and longer, and I'm getting up earlier and earlier in the morning because I want to spend more time there. It just
Yeah.
became so fulfilling. And I had forgiven, I don't know if forgiven's the right word, accepted
Mm,
accepted my path, the path that God had put me on in this world, and why was I born into this family? I have no idea. I don't care anymore. I do, and would I change any of that? No.
mhm.
I would not change one thing. I would not change my father telling me I was a mistake, because it helped me to become me today, who I really like, and so how else would I have gotten here without that? Because it did
Yeah.
take me down roads that um I needed to heal from. And in my healing, I have come across some of the most amazing people. Just uh, just people that uh, God has put in my path that have just
Mhm.
changed everything about what I think about humanity, about God, everything. It's just so beautiful.
Wow, that's I can like just stay here and hear you talk about it. It's amazing. It sounds to me that, like, from what I'm hearing right now, that your definition, you just maybe not consciously but implicitly gave what your definition of surrendering for you was. Apparently, like, for you, surrendering is acceptance. You say acceptance, accepting what happened to you,
Mhm.
like, and also not caring about finding the answers for things that, like, some questions that, like, apparently do not matter, right? Like, because you're like, I don't even care anymore, right? I just, this is my path. Like, I found, like, to go back to the definition of higher power, like, I found it hard to define a higher power, because the moment I try to define it, I put limitation on what my higher power is. But so far in my journey, I the only people I've seen met who understand, who are attuned in communion with their higher power, are people who've been in recovery, right?
Mhm.
And the idea of being at peace, that, like, there's nothing to worry about. I mean, there's, like, the small worries of the world, but even those, like, they cannot shake us at our core, right? And when we mention God and higher power, how sometimes other people just, their perception of us is like we're all silly, like, we just drop in the God word, like we're like zealots. Yeah, some of other people might think that we are zealots.
Yes.
But how do you deal with that? How do you deal with those who probably know you before and be like, oh, now she's the Jesus woman? So
um, wow. You know, I think for me, I'm at an age too in my I'm just turned 55 this year. And
mhm,
so, and I have over 25 years in recovery. So you know, early on recovery was difficult in the sense that I really did, they say you have to change people, places, and things.
yeah,
I almost had to walk away from pretty much every friend that I had at that point, because the ones that were left, because I had alienated a lot of people. But I couldn't, partying was just no longer a part of my routine anymore. And so
mhm,
the people I was hanging with didn't want to not party, and so um that was difficult. Since then, though, I would have to say that as new beliefs have entered, or old beliefs with a much better face on them, that sort of thing, have entered in and out of my life. It's almost like I guess it feels like God's paving the way with my sobriety, with
mhm,
my abstinence from compulsive eating. You know, the people that I need when I need them are there.
mhm,
And by that I mean, my first sponsor in the program is not my sponsor today. Like she was exactly what I needed when I first walked in the doors, right? We parted ways amicably at one point, and I got a new sponsor and everything. The woman that I'm working with now is a beautiful woman of Christ. And had she been there first, I probably would have went running in the other direction,
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so, like, I think God just puts the people I need in front of me. And in addition to that, I don't know if it's the age I am or just where I am with my journey with Christ, I really don't care if someone wants to call me a Jesus freak or, my sister, my sister said to me, um last summer, she was like, well, you always talk about Jesus, like, I mean, because I said
Yeah.
something about it, and I was like, well, yeah, that's who I am, like, that's today he is my number one relationship, and so
Mhm.
of course I'm going to talk about him a lot, and I'm going to want you to know him, because what I can tell you about what he's done for me is that I have peace in my heart, in my mind, in my soul. That some of that came from putting the food down and putting the alcohol down. But the peace that I have now that comes from my relationship with Jesus is it's indescribable.
Yeah.
There's no way to describe it. There's no
No, I
way.
think I think I got you on that. Like the when you put like the substances out, there's the piece of like your body just feeling better, your mind start feeling better. But once you get like a higher power in communion with your higher power, it's your whole like spirit now. That I'm a believer that a healthy person as like it's like a three-legged stool, like a tripod, body, mind, and spirit.
Yep.
Body and mind usually works together. Like like once you take care of your body, your mind it feels better. But the spirit is something that we need to work on to be in communion to keep everything balanced. Me in my recovery journey, working out is very important. Like like
Yes.
once I work out, my mind is set right, and when my mind is set right also my body feels better, vice versa. And like need to come in like you, I like to take my mornings early and quiet,
Hmm.
like at least have 30 minutes where I don't check my phone, I just look at the ceiling, I just think, like just thinking or sitting in my chair and thinking. Like
Yeah.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
um, I want to circle back to those two men that were like very important. One was the counselor that helped you digging through the trauma,
Hmm.
and the other one was the chaplain, I believe.
Yeah.
The first, yeah. So, how important it is to find the right support group when the people you trust, the right support group when you come up of when you try to when you're early in your recovery, right? Because yeah,
Yeah, it can be dangerous,
it can be
depending
dangerous. We talk
on.
about that,
Yeah.
yeah, off camera, where you can end up in the wrong group, like we were talking about sometime in AA. There are people who are still sick and suffering, and the fact that we are in that vulnerable position, we're like very exposed to people who have, bad intention.
Mhm.
But the people who have bad intention in those circles are have the disguise that they want to help, which is like very how you say pernicious,
Yeah.
yeah. So how do you deal with that? What's your take on it?
It's very similar to what you see happen in religion, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the whole thing about the priests, that were abusing boys in the
Yeah.
Catholic Church, or, there's people in any I believe in that there is an evil force in this world,
Hmm.
and anytime that there's a movement to help, it's going to try to infiltrate that in one way or another, because God forbid people get healthy, right? And I was blessed in my early days of recovery to have people around me, my sponsor, my grand sponsor, reminding me constantly, watch people how they walk. Everybody can talk a good game, you
Yeah.
know, but watch the people who show up on time for meetings. Watch the people who do service. Watch, like they told me all the things that I was looking for. And they all said to me, they pretty much, you know, for the most part, you're only supposed to make suggestions to newcomers. These women, not with me, man. They were like, you are not dating anyone for the first year at least. And after that, then you have to run them by us. I mean,
Yeah.
they were like hawks over me, and thank God that they were, because I was a nightmare. I was an
Yeah.
absolute nightmare. Um, and so I had these people around me, and that first sponsor was the one who sent me to the counselor. And he helped so many people in my area where I lived, or where I
Mhm.
live. He actually passed away in 2020. um, but I can look around a meeting today, and I can see, probably in a room full of, say, 30 people, I can say at least 5 that I know went through his counseling. And they're different people. They're different people.
Mhm.
He had a gift. He was like a channel, for healing. And the beautiful thing about him, one thing that he taught me, the major thing he taught me, was that he wasn't anything special. He
Wow.
he was very humble without saying he was humble. You
Mhm.
know, he um he consistently pointed to a higher power as the one in charge of the sessions that we were having. Um and after I graduated out from, the group, I did probably about, I think it was about 4 or 5 years of really intense work with him. Um and then, he said, I'm ready to send you on your way. And he said, but I'm here if you need to come back for a tune up, or whatever,
Yeah.
anytime. And I did a couple times. Um, but then I would see him places, because we're both in the same recovery community. And he was very good at setting boundaries with people. Just by the way he behaved, he taught me how to age in recovery in an
Mhm.
attractive way. And uh, uh, and that's just, to me, that's priceless. I mean, to be able to look at someone and see, what, that's how I want to be like that person. Because there are enough people that are showing me how I don't want to be. Right?
Yeah.
There's plenty of those going around. But when I see someone like that, who, first of all, I respect because of the time and attention and energy he gave to helping me,
Mhm.
so I'm going to pay more attention. Well, he was what he said he was, and so for me, that's huge, because I lived with a man who helped a lot of people. My dad's funeral was like 2 days long because there were so many people who wanted to come pay their respects. I mean, he helped a lot of people. He was not that person, though. you know
Mhm.
there again, God uses everybody.
Yeah.
God knows how to. I mean, let's talk about King David, if you want to talk about somebody who was a little off the beaten track, and God certainly
Yeah.
used him. But look at some of the things he did. It doesn't make it okay. It just, God knows what he needs to do with people. But this man who was my counselor, he was trustworthy. He showed that in a million different ways, and that's how I want to be. And then the chaplain, was the same way. I mean, he wasn't an addict himself, but he was very good at working with addicts, which I think is one of the reasons that he became the chaplain at a college, because there are a lot of them running around there, and he was very good at working with them. And one of the things that I loved about him is that he never once judged me about not being a member of a church. Never once. He said, I remember him saying to me, Jessica, I like to refer to myself as a Galilean Christian. And I was like, what do you mean? This was before I even went to seminary. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, the first disciples were from Galilee.
Yeah.
And they knew what Jesus meant when he said, break bread together. Do this in remembrance of me. They didn't start they didn't start building churches because they couldn't. They were
Yeah.
being condemned and persecuted. They had to hide in houses and, but they kept doing it and they kept loving each other the way he loved them. And that's what I want to do. I don't care about all these creeds and doctrines and traditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny, but like that's rare to see like uh a counselor or therapist who like, okay, now little bird, it's time to fly on your own. Like
Yeah.
I feel like in our society, and I would like your take on it. In our society now, we're so heavily therapized.
Therapists. Therapists.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We do so much therapy that sometimes I'm like, I'm under me personally. I'm under the impression that like you have the people who are in therapy just to use it as an excuse like for like self-pity or like be like, oh, I'm a victim, or like to victimize themselves. And you have those who are in therapy who like really want to do the work. And I don't know, now we're going to talk a little bit, you can take that as a segue to talk about the work you do with other people. But what have you witnessed, you personally, when you talk to people who are in therapy or trying to work on themselves?
It's kind of the same as people who come into recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just said, there are some people who want to stay in self pity. It's a very comfortable place.
Yeah,
I
it is.
stayed there for a long time. So I can't be judgmental about it. It's just a reality of the disease that we carry. And then there are people who really want to get well. And, those are the people who, they come in and whether it's to a therapy a counseling session or into rooms of recovery or whatever, and they're like, tell me what to do. I'll do it. And that's sort of where I was. I was just like, I don't care what you tell me to do, I'm going to do it. Even though I was pissed off. I didn't want to have to do it, but at the same time, I also wanted to feel better. I was tired of feeling like crap all the time. And so the thing I love about recovery for the most part and about doing spiritual direction now
Mm-hmm.
on my own is that people who usually show up there, they really want it, because not a lot of people even know what spiritual direction is. And so by the time they find out about it, it's because they're seeking it.
They're
They're
seeking it.
looking for
Yeah.
it. It's not like the judge said, unless you go to this, you're going to go to jail. There's none of
Yeah.
that. And so I feel like when I'm working with someone in spiritual direction, I have sort of an open book, an open heart, an open mind, an open soul, and together we can we can improve their relationship with their higher power. And I do work with a lot of people who are in recovery, and so I try. It's harder and harder the closer I get to Jesus, but I try very hard to stick with the word higher power, simply because I don't want to scare anyone away or make anyone think, well, I can't go talk to her because all she ever talks about is Jesus.
Jesus. Yeah.
But I want them to know that I get it. I was there at one point. And if you want to sit here and talk about the creator of the universe, that's okay with me, because
Yeah.
it's the same thing in my head, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Nah, I get it. I get it. Yeah, like the power of also of identification. When you can identify with a person, you feel like more relatable. You feel like more at ease, I will say. Yeah, like I understand. Is there still things that you are struggling with even after 25 years of sobriety?
um, I believe there will be. One of my friends in recovery always, after she shares in a meeting, she'll say some crazy thing that she did or whatever, and she'll go, "So there's no danger of me getting well. I'll be back." And that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah.
Life is significantly better. I have peace today,
Mm-hmm.
but of course, there's still things that really at times I forget about, like turning my phone off. I'm sorry. I don't know if you could hear that. My phone was ringing.
No, I could
So,
not. Yeah.
um, but like those defects of character that sort of rear their ugly heads every once in a while.
Yeah.
Remember me? I'm judgment, and I'm going to sit on your shoulder during this meeting and tell you how everybody here is stupid. I mean that.
I'm guilty of it. Yeah, I'm guilty of
And
it.
and I want and there's a part of me that wants to go, oh gosh, I shouldn't think like that anymore, I should be better than that. And I don't say that anymore either, because I'm
Mhm.
human. I'm human, and I'm gonna think stupid things, I'm gonna say stupid things, and if I beat myself up over that, then I'm part of the problem. I just have to accept that sometimes I'm gonna mess up. I mean, the what does it say in the 10th step? When we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. Not if we were
Yeah.
wrong, when
No,
we were
no,
wrong,
we're wrong. Yeah.
And so they're basically setting us up to recognize you're gonna mess up, you know.
Yeah.
I would say probably, my biggest thing is fighting the ego in the sense that I do, as much as my dad drove me nuts growing up, because he was so self-centered and just so full of himself. I can be that at the drop of a
Mhm.
hat. And I that's why my morning time with God is so important to me. Because
Yeah.
I need to make that surrender every day. Like, look,
Mhm.
man, you are in charge of this today, not me. When I start to think I'm in charge, could you just bonk me over the head, please? Because I sometimes I need to be bonked in the head,
Yeah.
you know. But it actually, I think it makes me more what's the word I'm looking for? Relatable for my sponsees still, because
Mhm.
I mean, would you want to go, work with somebody who thought they were perfect?
Yeah, because
I
like,
mean,
yeah.
it doesn't, so they see me mess up. They see me, do stupid stuff. It's
Mhm.
just who I am.
I think also the another benefit of thinking that way is like it allows you not to be complacent and always be on top of your game, like that. Because 25 years, I'm sure after 5 or after 10, you're like, okay, I got
Yeah.
this, kind of, right? Yeah, that feeling must have like creepy said also, right? Like,
Well, I
yeah.
will say there were some, times in around those years, 5, 10
Hmm.
years, where I did start to, kind of get a little full of myself.
Hmm.
And there were people who were put in my path who told me the truth of what they were seeing.
Yeah.
And I am so, I mean, I could have, of course, walked away from them, but I'm just so grateful to God that, number one, they were put there and they had the courage to say to me what they saw, and that I listened, and I didn't, close down to the truth, because
Yeah.
that's the part, I think, of people that, the truth about ourselves is probably the most painful thing we're ever going to
Yeah.
discover,
Hmm.
you know?
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dorothy.
No, I was just going to say, and I think that's what scares people away, and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so grateful that uh, I'm blessed with wanting to know the truth about myself, because I'm a lot of people want to feel good, and in order to feel good, they're willing to accept a lie.
Yeah.
But the problem with a lie is like that deep down we know it's a lie, so we need to reinforce that lie every single time, and it's exhausting. I've been there,
Yep.
lying about yourself.
Yes.
It's exhausting. The peace only comes with the truth, even if the truth is painful, it's ugly. Once you accept it, okay, this is who I am. All right, how can I get better from there? Like, instead of lying to ourselves, no, I'm not like this,
Right.
like,
Right.
yeah.
And
Hmm.
all those things that led me to here today, all those
Yeah.
horrible things that I talked about, you know, I don't want to rehash them all my life. I also don't ever want to forget them.
Mm-hmm.
And I also will be the first one to sit down with a newcomer and say, yeah, I was in Students Against Drunk Driving when I was in high school. I was the vice president because I was going to show my dad how horrible it was to drive drunk with people in your car and how you could kill people. And I was also then the person who, about 10 years later, came out of a blackout in the middle of a highway driving her car.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
that's not, I'm not proud of that, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to tell somebody that because the reality of being an addict is, for me anyway, there is nothing inside of me that wants to behave that way.
Yeah.
And yet there I am behaving that way. And I cannot stop myself. I can't stop myself from doing it. I always say to people, especially newcomers, I couldn't stop myself from starting. And once I started, I couldn't stop,
Gonna stop. Yep.
and so that's a conundrum. you know, that's a rock and a hard place. And I'm in between going, how the heck do I get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And there's only one answer to that. It's a spiritual solution. And I'm here to tell you that if you're not willing to pick up that tool of spirituality, it's not ever going to take. You can, like you said, the three legs of the stool. You can do
Mm-hmm.
the physical and the mental until you're blue in the face, but until you add that spiritual leg,
Mm-hmm.
it's not ever really going to take hold and give you peace.
Yeah. All right. I think this is a beautiful place where we can stop. So last question, Jessica, where we can find you, what you have going on lately, you share us your book, where to find it. And
Yes,
yeah.
you know what? Everything about me you can find on my website. It's my name with my middle initial, jessicalmorris.com. And my books are there. Hopefully, I'll have a third one up there pretty soon. I'm waiting to hear back on that one. Information about spiritual direction is there.
Mhm.
Some of my poetry is there. I do a blog. If you want to get the blog, you can get that. There's just all kinds of stuff about me there. That's the best place to go.
Yeah. All right. All right. Thank you very much for being a guest on Stairway to Redemption. And I wish you the best. And guys, I will see you next week or in 2 weeks. We'll see.
God bless.